We're so happy to welcome you to this event tonight. For our alumni and students, this is part of our ongoing commitment to support you as you transition to the alumni community and continue learning with AUP long after graduation. And we have more learning opportunities coming up soon, including a virtual session with an immigration attorney. So stay tuned for that. And to those of you joining us at AUP for the first time, welcome. We are so delighted to have you tonight. And of course, thank you so much to our speakers, Nicolas Castillo and Julien Darras, for being here and so generously sharing your time and expertise with us this evening. So thank you all again for coming, and we're so excited to get started.
Thank you, Holly. Thanks everyone for being here. I apologize, I put a mint in my mouth because this is not a webinar, this is real life, and the breath is important. So we're going to present to you all today about starting a business in France, and that could be starting from scratch. It could be you have an idea and you're starting with some momentum, and it could be that you already have something in the works and you want to make that maybe more permanent. You want to make sure you're fully compliant. So the full spectrum here works, and we're here to try to answer as many questions as possible. And of course, if you have any questions after the event, we'll be around for a little bit, and we can always have a follow-up one-on-one call. We also do joint calls together so that we can talk US and France together. But before that, let's talk about this presentation we have for you. A little bit about me. My name is Nicolas Castillo. I'm a CPA based out of Florida. My CPA is in Florida. I'm based out of Spain, in Madrid. That's where I've lived with my wife for the last 4 years. And so we also live the expat business owner kind of life. So you're not alone. We're doing it too. So what do I say here about myself? So yeah, I spent the early days of my career in public accounting in the US, in Miami, for big international firms. I did public accounting. I did private accounting with a big Fortune 500 company. And after a little bit of doing that, I decided to, help individuals that are, abroad with international issues, do, their tax compliance. And then we started this business about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. Time has flown. And it's been a pleasure to work with individuals, helping them set up businesses, be compliant in Spain, France, Italy, and Portugal. And I'm happy to keep doing that. It's been a really good time doing that.
That's my turn now. So hi, I'm Julien. So I'm born and raised in France. So nothing exotic. I've been practicing international tax law for over 15 years. I started my career in Morocco, and then I worked in Luxembourg. Afterwards, I opened my office in Paris, and recently I set up my another firm in Barcelona. So I'm quite well acquainted with international taxation issues and I advise foreign clients how to set up a business in France, because we know how difficult it could be, and we are going to dig into that in details. Right?
Yeah. So who is this session for? Like I kind of prefaced at the beginning, it's for Americans who are considering having a business in France. It's for Americans who already started one and want to know if they did it right, because that's a big thing. If we do it right in the future, that's great. But if there's some compliance issues in the past, then that can open up, a wormhole. And so this matters because if you're a student, then you want to stay here. You need to think about immigration. You need to think about tax. You need to think about your U.S. tax as well, not just the French side. If you have, a company employment opportunity, that's great because they will sponsor you, you hope they do. Or you could start a business and kind of make that opportunity for yourself. The Americans in this room, it's really important that, we're bringing two systems with us wherever we go. We have the American system and then the system that we choose as our home. So we have to balance both of those, and that's why both of us are here. And then, of course, the decisions you make early, they have lasting effects. So it's best to plan and, think about things ahead of time. So I'm going to do a very high level expat taxes 101 in case anyone, needs the refresher, or just it's new information. So when we're in the US, we get hounded by, those TurboTax commercials. April 15th is the tax deadline. That is the natural standard deadline for Americans in the US. And it is still an important deadline for us as Americans abroad. But it is important that as expats, we live outside of the US. We have probably French tax forms that we need to wait for. The list goes on the reasons why we need more time. And so the IRS has built in an automatic extension for 2 months for people like us. And so that's why we have June 15th as a official filing deadline for Americans abroad. Now, that still may not be enough time because, things can take longer, especially in Europe. We're seeing tax returns done well into the summer, right? So October 15th is a filing extension that we generally always use. That gives us plenty of time that we can file everything in coordination with the local returns. And it's pretty easy to request that. Everything is done online. Now, December 15th is kind of a statutory rule with the IRS. Since we get 2 months from April to June, we also get 2 months from October to December. But it is very difficult to request and it's difficult to get approved for it. So we generally don't like to use it unless there is a case of emergency. And so this whole time I'm talking about filing dates because filing is really important. It's a paperwork that we do, but paying is always still going to be April 15th is the latest that you should pay, because anything after that, you will incur penalties and interest. So if you expect to owe something after you factor in, French taxes, April 15th is the important deadline. So what are the obligations on top of filing your 1040 for someone who is having a business abroad, right? So you still have to file your US tax return. So that as long as you are a US citizen or a green card holder, you have that requirement. So filing Form 1040 every year and reporting your worldwide income. So whether it's income from a US source like capital gains in the US, or you have maybe a rental property in the US, that's reported on the 1040 on the US return. And so is the French income. If you have a French interest from a French bank account, if you have a French employment, if you have a business here in France, then you are reporting that in the US as well. Bank accounts are something that are very often overlooked. This is the FBAR filing requirement. This form stands for Foreign Bank Account Report. And it's basically if you have a checking account, a savings account, or any financial account that is not in the US. So in France, in Germany, in Belgium, you have to report the balance of that account to the US, to the Treasury Department every year, as long as the total you've had in that account the total you've had in all of your accounts exceeds $10,000. So if you ever had 6,000 in one account and then you had another 6,000 in the second account, the sum of that together is 12,000. That 12,000 exceeds 10,000, you have to report both. Even if you have a third account that is zero, you have to report all of them. And so it's very important not to miss that, because you can get hit with a $10,000 penalty from the IRS, the crimes department. You want to avoid that. FATCA is this other concept. It's kind of like FBAR times two. Effectively, if you have anything like a French pension, assurance vie, and some other foreign financial accounts. Let's say you made a loan to another person, you have to report those as well to the IRS. And so let's say you start a business in France, you might need to file Form 5471. That is a corporate return that you have to disclose income statement, balance sheet, intercompany loans, dividends if you take money from the account. So that's a very important one that also carries $10,000 penalties. Form 8858 is if you have a freelance activity, any basically non-structured account. like even a micro entreprise counts for this. You have to file this form. And then typically if you're self-employed micro entreprise, you have to file under Schedule C, which is a freelancer self-employment income form. So all that being said, those are informational forms that if you fail to file, there is a penalty. The forms, I guess, help you to reduce your U.S. tax and avoid double taxation, are related to the tax treaties. So you have a U.S.-French tax treaty that helps us to avoid a lot of tax on, let's say, retirement income. So IRAs, 401ks, and even, whether a U.S. income source is subject to French tax. The tax treaty does affect that, and that's really important for us to go over. The totalization agreement is a social security treaty that it helps us to avoid self-employment tax and FICA Medicare. Then let's see, that's you. One thing more I want to say is that typically when you are in France, you're working here, you're paying taxes here, you are eligible for two possible anti-double tax rules. One of them being the foreign tax credit, where if you are paying taxes here of, let's say, 25%, and in the US, your tax rate is 15%, just to pick some numbers, as long as the US tax rate than the French tax rate on your French income, you end up paying no tax to the US. You only pay to France. The other option is the foreign earned income exclusion. That is a form that, or a rule that says that you are earning income while over here, you get to exclude up to $130,000 of it from your taxable income in the U.S. And so both of those are really important. But yeah, when you start a business, there's sometimes a balance of both. Or we generally, because you are in France, you pay the taxes here. It's a foreign tax credit that you take advantage of. Okay, now I'll hand it over.
Yes, thank you. So how you structure a business in France? And basically you have three forms. You have micro entrepreneur regime, and that's you doing business on your own name. Or you can set up a company, and the company can be an URL or the SS, and we are going to get into details into those forms. It's really to decide to think those structures, because it will have an impact on taxation in France. They are taxed differently under the micro entrepreneurs regime. You are taxed on revenue, and under the URL and the SS, you are taxed on profits. These structures have different administrative costs. There is almost no cost with respect to micro entrepreneur, the nice thing. And with respect to companies, you have a minimum cost. We have the full accounting to undertake and to file accounts with the commercial codes. Growth, you are capped with the micro entrepreneur regime up to 77k euros. That's for services only. If you are selling, if you have a trading business, it's much higher than that. It's 188,000 euros. And you have no limit with respect to companies. And it's easier to find partners, to structure a partnership, or to go for to raise money with a company. Then some investors or partners or clients tend to prefer that you are structured as a company and to work with you. But that's not true for everything. Nicolas mentioned tax treaties and social security treaties that we have between France and the US, and they are quite favorable. You are lucky that you have a double tax treaty that can help you to pay no taxes in France on passive income. So at the end, you will be paying taxes only on French source income. So if you are doing a business in France, we may dig into the LLCs afterwards for those who may want to create one or already have one in the US. And with respect to social security contributions, so if you're in France, you should be paying your social security contributions in France only. Okay. And if we look closely at those expenses in France, So social charges. It's important, as I said, to decide which structure you want to go for. The SASU is quite expensive because you are treated like a salary, you're like an employee. So you would pay high level of social contributions. And if you go for the micro-entreprise regime, you would pay only roughly 25% on your revenue. Decide on one or the other structure. It's really about how much do you expect from the state when we retire? What would be the pensions? So if you are confident that the French state will pay you a pension afterwards, that may be interesting for you to set up a this, for instance, or you rather than a micro-entreprise. But if you are like, if you in your business and you are not counting on pensions in the future, the micro-entreprise regime can be interesting. We've added a link to the Eurosaf website through which you can compare the your social charges depending on the legal form that you opt for. So it's quite interesting and useful. The same for taxes. I've added a link to the Ango website, so that's fiscal administration in France. If you have a company, it's quite easy. I mean, you pay your corporate income tax at 15 or 25%. But if you set entreprise, that's just like a solar in the US, you pay your taxes at progressive rates on everything. Okay? So it's difficult to predict. You would like to mention reporting?
Yes. So any entity that you select to do your business through in France has an effect on your US filing, because you have to disclose any business that you have to the US. And the main mechanisms are through these forms 5471, which is a controlled foreign corporation, form 8992, which is how you calculate the tax on the income generated from that foreign corporation, or the 8858, which is how you disclose a foreign branch activity, which I know it sounds odd that you'd be considered foreign branch, but if you are a micro entreprise or you're running a business through not through an entity, you would file form 8858. And so these are the most commonly triggered forms, although, and they both will come with some form of income tax. But the good news is that U.S. self-employment tax, so FICA, Medicare, which as a self-employed person, or if you own boss, you're paying around 15% FICA, Medicare. So all of these kind of structures eliminate the self-employment tax in the U.S. because either you have a salary from the company that you started, and therefore you're not self-employed, or you are self-employed and you are paying into the French social tax system, and therefore you are exempt from the U.S. social tax because of this totalization agreement, this Social Security tax treaty that we have. So another thing to be cautious about is when you have your business, you want to make profits, you have to be careful with certain French or otherwise non-US investments, because some of them can trigger PFIC rules. PFIC stands for Passive Foreign Investment Company, and it's effectively a mutual fund or an ETF that's outside of the US. It gets taxed very poorly because the US wants to disincentivize that. So we have to be very careful. Even though it's your French company, when you want to make a French investment, it could still have ramifications on the US side. So, beyond $200,000 in profits, there becomes a lot of really interesting cross-border things that we can't distill into a presentation. And so a lot for us to consider, especially if you're at that profit level. So, that's kind of an asterisk, a red flag if you're at that level.
To give you an idea on those structures and when to use them and for what, entreprise individuelle. So I mentioned the micro-entreprise. The micro-entreprise is the regime under which your expenses are determined at a flat rate. So for services, it's 30%. For commercial services, 50%. And for selling goods, it's 71%. Those it's a simple, cheap, and fast to set up structure. And it's really good for solo entrepreneurs. Okay, so you want to test an idea, you set up your freelance activity within, and then you are able to work and start making business in France. It's really easy to maintain. You have paperwork because at the end you only need to log revenue on the Eurostat website, so the Social Security Administration, and that's it. There is no more accounting, no more paperwork. So it's like the sole proprietorship. The bad thing or the limitations on that regime is that you are capped on the revenue that you can make, as I mentioned earlier, and you have no limitation of your liability. In theory, because since 2022 we had a reform, and then you can opt for a distinct regime to limit your liability. But in theory, you are unprotected unless you opt for. Then you have the sole proprietorship, so the entreprise individuelle under the real regime. So when you exceed those ceilings, you are taxed on the full revenue. So your expenses are deducted for their real amount. And those this regime is appropriate for those who have high expenses higher than the expenses assessed with the rate I just mentioned. Okay, and on that case, you need to keep accounts and to file accounts with the commercial court. And generally, that one is not used unless you need simplification. You want to deal with a company. But generally, clients, when they start with a micro-entreprise, then they move for a company once the business grows. Okay, talking about the company, so you have two main forces. You have the SASU, the SAS. So it's like a C corp. The good thing about the SAS, you can customize everything in it. The BISOs are quite flexible, and it's really appropriate to start with the objective to raise money. It's a good structure too if you want to contribute to your pensions, because as I said earlier, social security contributions are high because you are treated like an employee, but you contribute for your future. Then you have the SARL, which is another legal form for that company. It's like an LLC. Can be tax transparent or tax opaque, depending on the option that you decide. So tax transparent, the profits are taxed at your level at progressive rates from 0 to 55%. And tax opaque, so the company is subject to tax, and you are taxed on at your level only if you decide to pay your distribution, to pay your remuneration, and to distribute dividends. And the company is taxed at 15 or 25% rate. Okay. The SRA is good if you want lower social security contributions. And if you want a cheap company, because the bylaws are quite standard, it's really easy to set up. And you have your liability protected. Your liability is to what you put in the company, in the share capital. That's why it's really interesting for you if you are taking risk for your business and you want to insulate your liability towards creditors. It's the best fit for you. Filings. So for companies, filings would be taken care by your accountant. You will pay and do that, or you can use the software, of course, do that by yourself. But generally, it's recommended if you don't have any clue of any knowledge about it to hire someone. For personal income tax. So, as I said, when you are under the micro-entreprise regime or the real regime, so you have to pay taxes on your profits at your level because you don't have any segregation between you and your business from a legal perspective. So you pay that. You need to declare and report those profits between May and June of each year, and you pay your taxes in September. For a company, it's the same if you decide to pay your salary or dividends. Corporate income tax, it is paid on a quarterly basis. You don't pay any installments the first year, so that's a good thing to dedicate your cash to your business. You need to file a liasse fiscale for the régime réel under the entreprise individuelle. so sole proprietorship, and for the company too. VAT, you can start with an exemption. As far as your business grows, you can first have a front, we will go through it afterwards. You can get a tax exemption, so you don't have to collect VAT on your clients, so you don't have to charge VAT to your clients, so you can keep your prices at the minimum level to start, but you cannot deduct the VAT which is charged to you. And when you exceed those ceilings, we are going to communicate these ceilings afterwards, then you need to collect VAT, and you can deduct VAT, and you need to increase your prices by 20% towards clients. We are talking about clients in France. If you charge businesses, other businesses, if your clients B2B, so in Europe, you don't charge VAT. It's a reverse mechanism. If you have clients in the US, for instance, you don't charge VAT too. So that's a big plus. That's a local tax which is forgotten. In Paris, it's like 200 euros per year, but it's something to consider. And it's paid more yearly. The first year you don't pay it. The years after you pay it. In Paris, it's quite cheap. If you set up your business outside Paris, it can be expensive. It can be the double. And I think that's it. And yes, tax reporting obligations. So when you file your taxes in France, that's an estimated schedule. Okay, this needs to be confirmed by the tax authorities. This will be confirmed in April this year. Because now that you are a tax, if you decide to stay in France and you are a tax resident, you need to file your own tax returns in France. If it's your first tax return, you will file it on paper. Okay. And then you will need to send it to your tax office the 21st of May. Okay, you need to file it first, and then in the following years you will file it online. Okay, and that's really a deadline not to miss. Otherwise, you will face a 10% penalty, which is automatic. Okay, you can always ask for a cancellation, but it's depending on your VAT. So the tax that I just mentioned. So you know VAT, you pay VAT every day now in France for your expenses, for food or your services. As a business, you will have to charge VAT unless you can apply the franchise en base. And as I said, so for services, if your business is mainly about services, you don't need to charge VAT if your services are below 37.5k euros. Okay? If you exceed that ceiling, but you are below 41.2k euros of revenue, you will need to charge VAT the following years. Okay, and if you exceed 41.2k euros, you need to charge VAT immediately. So you need really to monitor your turnover, your billings, because you may have to charge VAT. Cross-border services, so I just mentioned for you, I mean, if you have US clients or clients outside the EU, you don't need to charge VAT. And the good thing is you can get back the VAT that you paid on your own expenses. So if you buy a laptop, you have, Google expenses because you're working on marketing, you can get back that VAT. Okay, under the franchise en base, you cannot deduct that VAT, which is charged to you. And that's it.
Okay. So, common questions and misunderstandings that you might have during your planning. So, what if my income is US sourced? So, by US sourced, we typically mean, oh, I got paid from the US. It's a company from the US that is my client, or capital that I sold in the US. Technically, if a tax resident of France, then the French tax authority will assert that you are a tax resident of France and then subject to worldwide income by default. There are rules to exempt certain sources of income, but by default, you are reporting your worldwide income. So another thing isn't setting up in France really complicated? Necessarily. So there's a few structures that Julien was talking about that are pretty easy to set up on your own, that they don't really cost anything to set up. There are more complicated structures that are very templated bylaws, right? Where you can just pull off a template from online and have a company. So it's not necessarily the hardest thing to set up. This one's great. We love this question because do we file in the US first? And so typically, the country that you're living in, where you are a tax resident, is the one that gets reported first. And that way we know exactly what you paid to that country, and we can claim foreign tax credits in the US and make sure, you're not getting double taxed. But technically, or I think in practice, we tend to file them towards the same time, just so we make sure that we're totally in collaboration and everything agrees with the other. Because you want both of your returns to be covering everything, not missing anything, but also not double taxing anything. And so for that reason, we do extend US returns almost always. As a US business owner, does that mean I pay Social Security taxes in two places, meaning social tax to the US, social tax to France? And the answer is no, because tax residents of France will use the tax treaty, the totalization agreement, to basically say, hey, I'm covered under one system in France. I don't have to pay into the other system in the US. So that wipes out the US FICA and Medicare obligation. So isn't setting up a corporate entity really complex? Well, kind of like I was saying in the second question, it can be, but the protection, the credibility that you get, and also the tax advantages that you can obtain from having a corporate entity are. And then the French tax deadline, that map was really good, but generally the tax deadlines are separate by, and they're confirmed in April. They're typically going to be in May. All right.
Yeah. Some mistakes that we see when we talk to clients. Sometimes they come with an idea, they want to set up a company, and we see that it would be more appropriate for them to set up a micro structure, for instance. So the idea is you really need to think about which structure you want to put in place before starting, the proceedings. Oh yes, that's one. Immigration. We have many clients being in France on a tourist visa, on a BLTS or long stay visa, and considering working remotely for the LLC in the US, for instance, because their immigration advisor may have told that we are in a gray area and it's possible. You need to know that if you want to register a business in France, you need a specific visa, so an entrepreneur visa or talent visa. Okay. We have had information from the Social Security Administration that they may not allow anymore people working remotely from France with a VLTS visa, okay, a long stay visa. And that's why it's important to consider changing your visa before starting a business in France. Okay. And it is more true that in France, if you want to report the profit from your business, you need to be registered. If you are not registered, we cannot tick the appropriate box in your tax return to report your income. So it will trigger a question from tax authorities. And if you receive question from tax authorities, you can continue with the tax audit, which we want to avoid. Copying what the French did, well, I think it's obvious. Every situation is different. We need to deal with your situation. You may have a partner, you may have children, you may provide consulting services, intellectual services, or commercial services. We cannot copy what this is doing, because you would be, optimization only for taxes. That's true. We have clients coming and telling us, no, I don't want to pay income tax. I'm going for the corporate income tax, but they don't see the administrative cost for that in France or in the US. So that's something to consider. Assuming that France is rigid or punitive by default, we are an administrative country. We are rigid, that's true. But we are really welcoming new businesses. I think President Macron has some good aspects when decided, to create a Choose France and to start translating into English some websites, administrative websites. So it's a good thing. So the micro-entreprise regime for foreigners is really a plus to start a business in France really easily, as we mentioned earlier. And ignoring the US side, no, now you know that with what Nicolas said, that you need to take care of the side too. Okay. Some incentives for you. If we go deeper into the analysis, first, when you set up a business, you can be eligible to a 50% reduction in social charges. Okay, so you have conditions. Okay, you need to be under 26 years old, right? Mm-hmm. If they just mentioned that. You need to be with France Travail looking for a job, for instance, and then you can have that reduction. So you don't pay, installments for corporate income tax the first year. You have the CFE exemption, the one that I mentioned. You have areas in France where you don't pay any taxes on your business for 5 years, but you need to leave nothing else around. Okay, so the idea is really to bring people to those areas. You need to cope with the nature, if you would like. A micro-entrepreneur. So we mentioned that the two of us. It's really cheap. It's a low-cost entry. It's really easy to close. So that's a big plus. And then you have all the environment in France helping you. You can get advice with the incubators and accelerators. You can have subsidies from BPI France, from associations to Réseau Entreprendre around Paris and in Paris. So it's quite easy to get an advice now in France. This matters for you. Like we said, now it's going to be more difficult. Holly mentioned that they're going to receive a presentation from an immigration advisor, and it would be nice and interesting to ask him or her about his feeling about that environment in front, that immigration environment. As I said, the last communication that we received from the USF is that you cannot work in France remotely, even if you have only US clients or foreign clients, for instance, because you are working in France. That's French source income. You need to be registered in order to report that income in France. Otherwise, you are doing a foreign rule action. So the idea in France is to start more low-cost structure like micro-entrepreneur. And as far as your business grows, you can adjust your structure. And it's really easy. We have tax incentives, tax deferrals. So when you decide to shift from one structure to another, you don't pay taxes on that. If you meet some conditions, of course, because we don't want to have tax fraudulent cases. But if you decide to transform your micro-entreprise to transfer your micro-entreprise to a company, you can enjoy tax deferrals. If you transform your company from an SAS to a URL, you have tax deferrals too. So it's quite easy. We are talking only about in administrative costs, but now they tend to be quite limited. Yes, and I think we talked about this together to the support system. You have plenty of documentation to easily create micro-entreprise. Really easy, it takes 20 minutes. Now with your provider on internet, you can translate what's the guichet unique website through which you create your micro-entreprise. So we don't have really added value on that. It's the same with the URL. You can go through a platform to create that company. It's really cheap because the bylaws are quite standard. If you create an SAS, it's different because as I said, we are flexible on the governance, on the clauses that we can write. And because the SAS is more dedicated for people who want to partner with someone else or who want to raise money, we need to be cautious about what we are writing in the bylaws. So here we a value, and we can help you to draft the shareholder agreements too. Okay, some recap of what we said. So trust the right structure. That's obvious. Keep your records. Yes, sometimes we see clients not taking care of of their receipts, of their invoices. More, we need to be compliant in France. And the last reform about the electronic invoices goes that way. You need now to use a specific platform to invoice your clients in France and to report your income to the Eurosaf for the administration. If you do business B2B business in Europe, you need to file a specific return with the customs, and that specific return is always in case of tax audits, the statute of limitation in France is 3 years. Okay, it can be up to 10 years if we are talking about fraudulent situations. The fraudulent situation could be you using an LLC to do business in France and not filing any return in France. Keep your US. Yes, of course. You need to be rich and you need to be used. You need to use those phone numbers for your accounts and your IRS. Opening a French account early, yes, because you are US persons. So it could be difficult in France to open a bank account because of FATCA. We have banks like Société Générale, BNP Paribas, and so the classic ones. They are work with a US person, so that should be fun. But you need to start the process early. So visa first, it's obvious, we just mentioned that. US filings also. Use your official government tools. As I said, now some of those websites are translated into English, and you have plenty of information and everything is in it. So you should have them. So I mentioned Guichet Entreprise, and we can share those links, and that they are quite useful. Maybe you want to take.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the key takeaways. So again, another recap is that starting a business in France is definitely doable. It's achievable, but Americans have an extra set of rules, and you have to consider your global tax position, your tax in France, and your tax in the US. Number two, that business structure decisions are business strategy decisions. And so deciding the right business in France up, the process that you want to follow is a strategic decision at the end of the day. And then also taking the time to build is far cheaper than having to dig yourself out of a hole in the future. So yeah, a 10-year potential statute of limitations if you do something wrong is pretty significant in France. But yeah, thank you all for your attention. I know this was we got pretty deep into it.